Hello and welcome to Positive Parenting. I'm Deanne Conrad, Community Relations Supervisor with the Sioux Falls School District. We welcome you to Positive Parenting, which is a joint venture between the education professionals of the Sioux Falls School District and the medical and child development professionals of Sanford Health. Our topic today is behavior challenges. Behavior challenges affect everyone across the board, whether that's parents at home or in the classroom where students are exhibiting those behaviors as well. So we're here to talk today a little bit about those behavior challenges, what supports are available in our schools, and medically, what can we do to support our children as they experience those behavior challenges, and we try to work with them to work those topics out. So that will be our topic today. We have great guests to join us, and I'll have each of them get started by introducing themselves. And Deb, if you'll start, please.
I'm Deb Molenberg-Wilson, and I'm the Special Services Director for the Sioux Falls School District.
Celeste.
I'm Celeste Youthy Bureau, the Interim Assistant Superintendent.
Wonderful.
And I'm Sarah Conradi. I'm a licensed psychologist with Sanford Psychology and Psychiatry Clinic.
So thank you all for being here today. I think behavior challenges, if you're a parent or if you've ever been a child, which we all have, you know that there are just the gamut of behaviors out there. The temper tantrums of the 2-year-olds to the more aggressive behaviors that sometimes happen as children are trying to identify who they are, find their independence, those types of things. Really, there's a cross-section, and we all have ways in which we exhibit anxiety or stress or that type of thing that may come out and appear as a behavior challenge somewhere along the line. You're rather new to the profession, you said, licensed a couple of years ago now.
Right.
What kind of work do you do most often with Sanford?
I have a lot of variety in my job, which is nice. I work with kids and adults. I do neuropsychological testing and evaluations, sometimes for learning disabilities or ADHD or other concerns in childhood, as well as testing for adults. And then I do therapy as well for adults and children, and mostly for young children it would be more behavioral therapy. And then as you move into adolescence, you can work more with the cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds obviously, a need for that in every community.
Right.
Certainly that there'd be challenges that students exhibit. What have we been seeing in the Sioux Falls School District in terms of behavior and then the required supports that go along with that?
Absolutely.
Either one of you can weigh in here.
I think one thing that we've seen is that the younger children tend to come to school, and as they are in a setting where there's rules or where there's just learning something and focusing, that's very new to a lot of kids who might not have had a daycare experience that really worked on some control with that, or just never had an experience in that. So that's a new learning part for them that they're not always prepared for and that they're not always receptive to. So sometimes we might see some behaviors that come out that they want to be in charge and do what they want to do when they want to do it. And when you get a classroom of kids of 20 or more, and we can't focus on just what one wants to do during that time. So I think that's what we're starting to see in our younger grades.
Sure. And so there are supports available for strategies that we're using with teachers or that teachers are learning. What kinds of strategies would be useful in a setting like this where kids need some direction, need some encouragement, and maybe just haven't experienced that requirement before, and now we're in a classroom, as you said, with 20 students, and there are all kinds of different ideas and things that people want to do, and what are some of the strategies that we can use with that?
Well, of course, being an educational institution that we are, education is always the key for us, especially starting with teachers first in the classroom, and that's to assume nothing and teach everything. So don't assume that the kids will just know that and read your mind of what you want them to do. We have to teach them and teach them those expectations and why we have to have rules, because when we have rules, everybody's happier. And we do get to do what we want to do, and we can learn something and have fun at the same time.
Right. And so what are those basic strategies even a parent could be using at home, or what do you suggest in terms of if there's a behavior like that where somebody's just not used to the structure,
Right.
the routine?
Right.
What are some ways that parents and teachers can really focus in on that?
Like Celeste said, just making the rules very clear and simple and easy to follow and understand. Having them stated, I think the classrooms do a great job of that, especially in the younger grades, of listing those classroom expectations. And then having those at home is also a good way for that generalization from the home to the school environment. So kids just know that I have some expectations of me, and when I do these things, I get rewarded, I get praised, I get reinforced by that, and that feels good, and so I want to do that more. And if they haven't had like a preschool setting where they haven't had any kind of structure of having to line up or having to sit still and quietly in one spot, that is very difficult for a child who hasn't had that. And so if you can even get your child into play groups where they're around children and teaching them those types of, sharing behaviors and waiting your turn and those type of simple things that they're going to be introduced to and really need to follow early on in kindergarten and throughout, that's beneficial for a child who hasn't had exposure to like a really structured environment like preschool or daycare even.
Right. So I think we could all agree that those would be low-level types of behaviors, things that we're working on, and that every person has to work on when they're in a new setting. What is the norm? What is right? How am I supposed to act here? How do I act there? And just understanding what those social norms are and the expectations are. We hear a lot about maybe a next step up in the advancement of just those normal learning opportunities is ADHD, the attention deficit disorder, where there's maybe something a little bit that is identified where the behavior becomes a little bit more acting out and severe and that type of thing. How much of that do we have in the district? I mean, is that something we're seeing more often?
I think the prevalence rate of specifically attention deficit is consistent in Sioux Falls with what you would see across the country. Some of those children need to learn prompts or cues for how to attend and to teach them compensatory strategies for, I know it's hard for me to pay attention in this kind of a situation, so how can I overcome that and know those strategies? So
choosing
for some
to sit
children,
at the front of the room
that's
or
right.
something.
So those are things I think you start with. Each of our schools has a student assistance team, which includes a variety of professionals from the school, teachers, the principal, counselors, who, if a child continues to struggle and isn't responding to some of those teaching opportunities that are going on in the classroom, then maybe that team will brainstorm. What could we put together for a plan to help this individual student so that the message is consistent with the people they come in contact with around our school, and then what can we do as the next step for a consistent plan that we're all implementing. And I think consistency is key for many of those youngsters.
Absolutely. And what I hear from parents, to follow up on that, is that a lot of what their child, especially with ADHD, is struggling with, is in the specials, where it's a little bit less structured, PE, art, music, where kids are kind of ready to release some energy and have fun, and it's a different setting, and that's sometimes where they struggle the most, recess, lunch. And so having all the teachers and staff that they're going to come into contact with understand, we've got a child that struggles with attention, and so these are the things that are working in the classroom, and you could try those here in gym, or there's social skills concerns, and so at recess we need some help, getting some friends together, and those are some things that I think parents report to me a lot in the clinic, is that in the classroom it's getting a little better, but they're still having a hard time in those other areas of the day.
Right, it is a less structured environment. We're asking kids to be creative in art and music, and use their bodies in PE, and so some of those rules are maybe not as easily identifiable when
Yeah.
you're in a big gym setting, and as opposed to when you're, in your classroom setting where things, maybe there aren't so many outside forces or just other activities that sort of send you in a different direction. So those are all important things that I think every parent can learn from. We have, on the next step up, we have students that are not able to be in a typical classroom setting because of their behavior challenges. What supports are available for them, and who are those students?
Absolutely.
I think maybe the next step would be schools and parents talking together about an individual child and saying, here's where the challenges are, and can we cooperatively come up with some strategies for that child. It might be at that point, if there have been many interventions tried and the child still struggles, there could be sometimes a referral for specialized evaluations to really study what those are. And sometimes parents choose to independently work with a medical provider to explore some of that. Some might come through the evaluation process for special education. So now you add on more interventions and a closer study of what all the factors might be. Is it attending, or is it also some things in learning are hard? And then you try to do a functional behavior analysis of the child and when they're doing certain things and what they're doing, and do you find a correlation of other factors?
Right.
And I think that's really important, that schools really analyze where's the behavior happening, what's the behavior, are there certain things that trigger it or make the behavior happen. Sometimes when you're the teacher or the mom, you're so close to it, it's hard to see it. And so sometimes it helps to bring in those specialists to really analyze that behavior and then develop a consistent plan. I am excited about some of the things going on in our schools to really intervene specifically in those specialized areas. We've added counselors.
Success coordinators.
Right.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and those specialists add a very different dimension to the perspective of a team in analyzing and brainstorming
Exactly.
interventions. Some of our schools have implemented what's called the Boys Town model, which is really a model that approaches behavior from the perspective of some children haven't been taught some social skills areas. And that's no one's fault. It's just the difference that all of us have in perspective of those skills. And so it's a very planned teaching methodology that if I don't know how to accept no as an answer, that we'll teach you ways to do that and still have a voice for what you want or you need. It looks at some of our behaviors as a communication tool. And so what's the behavior trying to tell us? So that we don't just always assume behavior is a planned defiance, because sometimes behavior has a very different function. I need attention, I'm trying to tell you something.
I don't understand the material.
I don't understand, I'm avoiding. So we really need to get to the bottom of that. And I think Boys Town gives teachers and parents and all staff more information about how to intervene in a positive way as opposed to looking at it negatively.
And Celeste, we have a number of schools trained in Boys Town and a number that will continue to get trained. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Over the summertime, oftentimes the schools come together and they go through an intense training, and we have trainers that have gone through the training program through Omaha, the Boys Town model, and then they implement the training, and then it's followed up throughout the year too. So it's not just a one shot where they get the training, it's followed up during the school year to make sure that they're implementing it in a very good way that's helpful to the kids and learning as they go with that. And it kind of goes back to that, assume nothing, teach everything. The Boys Town model presents that teaching approach and helps everybody be on the same page. Because there's so much power, and one of the powerful things about the Boys Town model is the use of the language. And then it's more understandable to all the kids because we're all using the same language. And then when that language can be taught to parents at home, that consistency between home and school becomes quite a powerful force.
Are you familiar with that model?
This much, yeah. I haven't utilized it myself. I actually, we should talk later, and you can tell me some of the parent resources. Because do you end up then giving parents resources, or do you recommend some type of parent training separately from what you do in the school?
Well, there's always parenting information, and again, the teams that Deb has referred to, if you go to the SAT team, that's a student assistance team, and parents are always welcome to go to that as well. Your counselor or success coordinator in your school, we have prescribed social skills that they train with the Boys Town model. So that's information that would be given to a parent of this is what we're focusing on, this is what we expect of kids. And it's very prescribed to looking someone in the eye, because that's something that's kind of become a fallen art at times when we think of technology. With this is that kids don't know, unless we teach them, how to look in someone's eye and what that means in connecting with someone. So it's prescribed like that, and so there is that information that we have available for parents.
And that support for parents, or the parent having the same language is, and again, you talked about consistency is
very important,
critical. So
very
when you talk with parents, what are you sharing with them? Are you encouraging them to, you know, get in touch with the school and that type of thing?
Absolutely, especially if I'm ever doing an assessment for a child and it's for learning concerns or ADHD. I always want a teacher report form back, and so the teacher would give his or her input on what they see in the classroom, and certainly more than one teacher is welcome to do that too. Sometimes I get more than one back, and that's very helpful information, because if it's not being seen consistently at home and school and public, then it's not probably ADHD. So you have to look at the environment, and is it the behavior, or is it the environment? And if it's not consistently seen, then okay, we're looking at more environmental behavioral strategies that we need to utilize at home or at school to address the behavior. So yeah, absolutely getting the school's opinion on what they're seeing, encouraging the parent to work with the school, educating them on, you know, the special education process, the IEP, the 504 plan, what they offer to a student, because a lot of parents, I think, are just overwhelmed because there is a lot of, they're wonderful processes and they're in place for a very specific reason, and kids go through certain steps just so they, you know, aren't left behind. But parents, I think, sometimes don't really understand that whole
it's like a separate world or another world.
Unless they've had a child previously go through that, or a friend who has a child, they don't, a lot of them say, I don't know what an IEP is. So just a lot of communication.
And again, that's where the team is going to come in to play, and will play a pivotal role in saying, okay, what are the available, what supports available, and that type of thing, and that's
and how to help them maneuver the steps of that process. Explain it.
Explain why it's done the way it's done.
And that is a difficult world, because there are all kinds of rules and regulations and performance things that need to be done in an order, in a very systemic process, in order to have a child qualify for something of that nature. In terms of the, you know, if there are challenges that happen during the school day, how are we protecting the students themselves and the students who might be in a classroom where a behavior is exhibited by another classmate?
We have trained teams who train staff in buildings on a methodology called crisis prevention intervention, which emphasizes that when a child's behavior escalates to a point that their safety or the safety of someone else is jeopardized, that you would first implement some strategies to de-escalate that child so they don't move on into more dangerous kinds of behaviors. When those things happen, usually an administrator from the building would be involved then And then they would start to have some discussion about what the behaviors specifically were and if they impacted the child or other children's safety from the perspective of discipline. So then that would move on to the principal for that next step. Sometimes if those behaviors repeat themselves or are so compromising, then we offer specialized programs outside of some schools at specialized sites in the district. We have those available from kindergarten through high school. The class size would be smaller. There'd be more staff available with specialty training in managing, both planning and managing behaviors. The goal is always for children to go back to their home school, to learn the skills they're missing, and then return to their neighborhood school and be able to maneuver that environment successfully. I think when you get to those situations, we as a school district are committed to the safety of all children, including the student who has the individual struggles, but also take our responsibility for that child to learn the skills they need to succeed in the future very seriously. So it's a balancing act of taking care of the individual with the struggle and yet maintaining the safety and the learning environment of all the other children. So those become complicated processes and emotional processes for everyone who are involved. And yet, as a school district, we are very responsible to everyone who's involved in the situation and the confidentiality of everyone involved also. So those become very delicate situations for school principals to manage.
You know, I come back to, as you're talking there, Deb, our mission statement as a district to educate and prepare each student.
Yes.
And we really do mean each. And as a society, if we weren't taking care and providing a quality education to a child that has a behavioral disability or something of that magnitude, then we would not be keeping our level of responsibility, and certainly we're committed to that. Every child deserves that and is afforded that opportunity, and so that does become a very delicate balancing act in trying to negotiate what is best for that child, what is best for that child's classmate next to them, and trying to figure that all out. Medically, you know, we hear about some medications that are used in trying to help kids focus or such. Is that is medicine the first thing that we revert to? Is it one of the tools? I mean, what's sort of the progression of as you're working with a child with behavioral issues? You know, where does that fall in the continuum of care that you use?
Well, of course it's always a parent's prerogative to decide what they're comfortable with for their child, and some parents are comfortable with medication, some would prefer to only use behavioral strategies and then use that as a last resort option. I think that we try to do a good job in the medical community of really working with the parent and the child to see what's best for them and their family. And typically the first line of defense is that pediatrician or family doctor. That is where a child typically gets their referral to myself for therapy or to one of my colleagues in psychiatry for medication. Oftentimes I work with my colleagues in psychiatry to you know, hit up from both sides and try to do the best thing, because research shows that the best treatment for ADHD is a combination of medication and behavioral therapy. You know, it's different for every student, it's different for every child. So it's always a lot of communication. Parents have to communicate how children are reacting, and what the teachers are seeing in the school is very important too, because that's the setting in which the medication is often utilized the most between the frame of those school hours.
Sure.
And so I think parents rely heavily on teachers to communicate with them how a child is reacting, and the feedback I'm getting is that teachers are more than happy to do that and are doing an excellent job in, you know, I'm noticing this, or you know, and I think it can be a difficult situation just to find the perfect combination of what works. But you just work with the child as he or she grows, and you adjust as new things come, and middle school happens and high school happens, and and you have to kind of look, there's always going to be new things cropping up to address, and kids growing. And
And we are coming up on our final few minutes of the program today, and would just ask for some final thoughts from our panelists today about continuing the conversation, keeping the lines of communication open between schools and parents, and what they're really seeing at home, and how we can negotiate these things so that it's best for all the students. Final thoughts, Deb, from you?
I don't think schools and parents can ever talk enough about what's going on. And I think it's important that everyone remember the perspective of everyone. No one wants children to misbehave, and everybody wants children to succeed. So communicating about how can we work together and remain open in that communication. It can never happen enough or fast enough.
Perfect. And those supports that we have available are available for reasons.
Absolutely.
But we're going to try everything we possibly can.
Absolutely.
At the lowest level.
Yep, at the lowest level. And we're also going to use the knowledge. The one benefit that we have that's so helpful for parents, and why using a team approach with them is so important, is we can give them a good understanding too of, in comparison to the norm of students, where do their children fall? Because as a parent, I didn't know that in a group setting. And so I always like to use the comparison of, if you think like a stoplight, a green area would be those normal kind of behaviors that kids have, those little glitches here or there, redirections that work with the child. That would be a green area. A yellow area would start to become those areas where they might need a little bit more focus and attention. It might be a counselor helping out, might be a success work coordinator helping out, and then they're able to learn that skill and move on. A red area would be those areas where it is causing them to not learn, or others not to learn area, and that's where we have to look at more solid supports, because we're working to get from red back to a yellow-green kind of a zone.
Right. And finally, comments from you, if parents have a concern about behavior issues, what advice do you have?
I think to always utilize the opportunities that the schools are providing with supports. Talking, like Deb said, you can't talk enough to the principal, the staff, the special educators, because they know what's available that a parent might not even know exists. And I think the schools do a good job at trying to get that information out to parents, but just asking those questions to make sure that you are aware of every opportunity that's available for your child. And then on the other end of it, if you're having concerns at home, that outside therapy can be beneficial to try to work on those things that hopefully can carry over into the school day, that the child can generalize and learn in school, because the end goal is just for a student not to just get through school, but to enjoy it. I mean, to enjoy those years and be successful and have friends and enjoy going to school. And I think when a child is struggling, it takes away from that enjoyment. And so I think that's everyone's goal. We all want that for them. So if you just keep talking and realizing you're on the same team, no one's working against each other, we're all working together for a common goal.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that would be a great point to end on, is the fact that there is a team of people. Everybody wants what's best for that particular child, and so you're not alone. You don't have to deal with it on your own. That there are supports available, and we encourage people to utilize those supports and resources available so that the child can become a member of society that is happy and is learning and contributing on a regular basis. So great discussion today about behaviors in children and young adults, and we thank you for joining us today on Positive Parenting.